having significant impact immediate. Sorry. Oh, sorry. What are the areas that AI is having a significant impact right away in many disciplines? And we see it really in just about every place. But certainly one place we see this, we see this in computer science, and we see it in language instruction and language. And I think more fundamentally, people are asking the question, well, why should I ever learn another language if I can just have AI translating things for me? And so Per has been, who's head of global languages, has been really deeply engaged in thinking about these issues, both in terms of what people need to know about this, how it sort of changes their lives, knowing different languages, and how we think about this in terms of instruction here as well. So thanks, Per, for coming today to talk about this.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is really, really great. And thank you for everybody for being here. And Shen, I don't know where you are now, but your presentation was really wonderful. And I will not be as interactive in the first half of my 30 minutes, so I will have a lot of remarks that are prepared, but I hope that we can find an opportunity to also to discuss together. When I was invited to this event, I was genuinely delighted, not only because this topic that brings us here together is so important and so near and dear to my heart, but it also offers really this chance for us to have like this interdisciplinary, post-disciplinary dialogue and like a huge, huge learning experience for me. So thank you, dear Eric, dear Sam, for this invitation. Given the contested role of AI in education, at least in some quarters, an invitation like this is also an expression of trust, and I'm deeply honored by that trust. Okay, over the next 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I plan to accomplish 4 things. I will first give you a context and offer a brief overview of my department, Global Languages, which is actually the largest unit in the humanities at MIT in terms of student engagement. Number 2, I will share a few snapshots of approaches my colleagues and I have developed in recent years around AI-enhanced language and intercultural learning. As a third point, I want to be clear and honest and admit that not everything is unicorns and butterflies. There are some challenges and there are a lot of things we're missing, and I want to name those, I want to confront those, and I want to outline what this is more the administrator speaking now, would like to accomplish in my unit in the next years. And then finally, I will end which maybe a slightly more philosophical tone and ask the important so what question, a question that I should actually perhaps start with. Why should we care about AI in language education and humanities education at a place like MIT at all? So languages at MIT, I hear that quite often. Not so much at MIT, but outside MIT. But languages have been at MIT since 1860. Yes, we've been here long before AI. The early curriculum focused on 3 languages, French, German, and Latin. At that time, these languages held a status very similar to the English language. Today, they functioned as lingua francas for scientific communication. This shows that from the very beginning, languages at MIT were calibrated to the needs of engineers and scientists. And I can tell you, we embrace that. As the curriculum expanded over the past 160 years or so, language educators at MIT have never compromised on this commitment to deliver world-class language and intercultural education tailored to the needs of future change makers in sciences, in engineering, in technology, and in entrepreneurship. So today, Global Languages offers 9 languages throughout the academic year and 5 emerging, less frequently taught languages during IAP. We offer majors in 3 languages, minors in 5 languages, and a SHAS concentration, which I often call our mini minors, in 8 languages. So the students at MIT, and that makes it so much fun to be a language educator and to be in the humanities at a place like MIT, the students recognize the relevance of our work. They understand that pairing STEM expertise with linguistic and intercultural competencies opens doors and it opens hearts. Many experience the power of this combination firsthand through international experiences offered by Misty. So our programs together, hand in hand, equip students to become global citizens, to be able to listen, to be able to empathize, and to be able to lead both around the world and in diverse communities around the block. So as a result, I'm happy to say that not a lot of language educators can say that in this country, enrollments are strong. Let me give you just one number, 24%. Last May, roughly 1 in 4 undergraduate students receiving their diploma in Killian Court had completed a concentration, well, a mini minor, in a language. I've written elsewhere in more detail about why MIT students are drawn to language studies. In short, it's the relevance of the curriculum, it's the quality of the curriculum, and it's the community that we're building. And if you ever have a coffee with me, I already apologize, you won't manage to get me stopped about my enthusiasm of teaching languages at MIT. Okay, let's come to the second part. So, part number 2. How does AI fit into this academic ecosystem that I've just described? To answer this question, I want to share a few examples of the diverse innovations that my colleagues are pursuing. So this is the second part of my presentation. Important for me is to state none of this happened overnight. Long before OpenAI's earth-shattering release a little over 3 years ago, colleagues in global languages were already grappling with the role of AI in language education. In no small part, this is due to our presence here among you at MIT. We're so privileged to work in an environment not just adjacent to, but immersed in cutting-edge innovation. As humanists, yes, we don't always fully understand what many of you are building. But make no mistake, the spirit of discovery and the culture of innovation you embody is contagious. So early work at MIT on AI and language education dates from the mid-2010s and focused largely on the implications of rapidly improving consumer-oriented machine translation. Here I want to highlight the work of my colleague, Dr. Takako Aikawa, who leads MIT's Japanese program. Her ideas influenced my own thinking on technology and education well before I myself arrived at MIT in July 2022. More recently, Takako has piloted an experimental Japanese course based on a pedagogical framework she developed and coined as Fluid Language Pedagogy, or FLAP. Supported by our instructional technologist, Joseph Borkowski, FLAP leverages AI to fundamentally think the traditional one-size-fits-all model of language instruction, and it radically individualized the learning process. I sometimes say tongue-in-cheek at Global Languages, we're not just flipping classrooms, we are now even flapping them. Last year, Chinese instructors Kang Zhu and Pan Gao received an Education Innovation Grant for their project Enhancing Language and Cultural Competence through AI-generated sociocultural scenarios. This grant gave them the time and space to explore how AI-generated dialogues can support the teaching of sociocultural and behavioral norms in modern Mandarin Chinese. The resulting models have now already entered and are embedded in MIT's intermediate and advanced Chinese curriculum. Min Liang's work shows that AI-enhanced pedagogies are also possible in beginning language courses. Her introductory Chinese classes, students use an AI image generator to explore lexical fields that relate to physical appearance. As her students interact with the system, they practice new vocabulary and receive instant feedback in form of the visual images that are generated in front of their eyes. But this work goes deeper. The generated images become a springboard for reflections about stereotyping and about bias in AI-generated images. I want to talk a little bit about my own work in this area. This is on one side, it tends to be more theoretically conceptual and less best practice oriented. And on the other side, I've been told at least, it has been also perceived as being wildly provocative. So yes, the conceptual research together with my collaborator Eva Desain, who leads French at MIT, has been very much focused on adapting established frameworks from developmental psychology to better understand how generative AI and frankly future technologies we can't even name yet, perhaps in this building but not in ours, how can they meaningfully be integrated in language and humanities education. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the provocative work, and not for the sake of provocation, but I think it's interesting for us to see how it can really, really show what's possible, but also the limitations on what's possible, and the things that one can do, but things that we can do are not always things that we should do. So I'll do that by talking about a question, and it's part of a question that I've been exploring in the recent year quite a lot. And that's the question, can AI technologies help students in content-based language courses or in area studies courses? Can these technologies help students to engage more critically with politically controversial topics? And this work has been primarily part of my course in European Studies. A few words about the course. This is one of the growing number of courses in global languages that are actually taught in English. So that while the focus here is not directly on language acquisition, but this course can be seen as emblematic of what's possible in advanced content-based language courses. So this course, it's basically, it's called Where's Europe? I always wanted to call it The End of Europe, ? But then I thought that's maybe too dark. But it examines how World War II, the Cold War, and Europeans' peaceful integration in the second half of the 20th century continues to shape how everyday Europeans think, act, and feel in response to these very complex legacies, generations later. At the same time, fading historical consciousness, rising nationalisms, populists' resentment against Brussels, and geopolitical instability cast doubt on the future of this very long era of prosperity and peace in Europe. My interest in using AI to support critical debate did not emerge in a vacuum. It's also shaped by our current political moment. The American First agenda is making it increasingly difficult to teach content-based language courses and area studies courses that inevitably have to touch controversial topics. At the core of this ideology is the idea that the United States is superior in all matters over all other nations. But our pedagogical task is different. It's precisely the opposite. My job is it to foster critical appreciation of the achievements and failures of other cultures. And through that lens, my students learn to reflect on accomplishments and failures of the United States itself. In today's climate, this kind of work can be labeled as unpatriotic. For colleagues without tenure, especially at institutions where the campus climate has been more directly affected, this creates a real dilemma that raises this key question. Can AI-driven tools, if carefully designed and used with clear pedagogical intent, create a protected conversational space in which students can explore multiple perspectives without placing instructors who inspire this kind of critical thinking at political risk or even professional risk? A course on contemporary Europe taught today in the United States is also always a course on transatlantic relations. And in 2025, this means grappling with the impact of Americans' recent turn towards unilateralism and transactionalism in diplomacy, trade, and defense. To engage students more deeply, I offered a co-curricular project organized around AI. Together with my students, we built and tested a custom language model that would allow users to debate the merits and the risks of this geopolitical reorientation with a chatbot. I built the first prototype simply using Google's Gemini LLM, and I called the chatbot JDBot. It was trained on Vice President's speech at the Munich Security Conference in February 2025, and alongside fed with responses from journalism, politics, business, and academia. 3 students were brave enough to participate in this co-curricular project. They tested the bot I created by challenging its logic and by asking it to defend the administration's new foreign policy stand and defend it against its critics. In their interaction, students engaged with the reasoning behind this geopolitical shift and its implications for Europe. And the idea is that to develop that tool further into something that can be used by all of my students so that they can practice to have difficult debates where they take a position before coming into class and then debating, for example, an artifact like the speech of United States Vice President at the Munich Security Conference. The 3 students who worked on this project with me also spent a lot of time reflecting on the system's limitations and proposed concrete improvements. In doing so, they not only deepened their engagement with the course content, they also developed a more nuanced understanding of the affordances and limitations of AI itself. And I see a cell phone that I'm filmed. Taken together, these projects illustrate the breadth of AI engagement across global languages. From Takako Aikawa's FLAP framework in Japanese to Kang Zhao and Pampan Gao's work on AI-generated social culture scenarios in Chinese, to Min Min's use of AI image generating in beginning language instruction, and to my own experiences. What stands out, if I may say that so modestly, but it's the seriousness of the inquiry that's going on. My colleagues are clearly not chasing the low-hanging fruit here. Frankly, anyone can turn an LLM with a few well-crafted prompts into a vocabulary drill application. But what my colleagues are doing here instead is pushing the envelope, pushing the frontiers, and probing how AI reshapes learning, meaning-making, and intercultural understanding. Okay, I want to stop all this bragging now, and I want to focus on what's missing. So what's missing, and what do we hope to accomplish, or do I hope to accomplish with my colleagues in the next 3 years? And I have to put in parentheses if I'm successful in securing the funding that I need for that. But let's first talk about the challenges. I see 3 big challenges in my unit. And maybe it would be interesting to hear if that's kind of something that's, that you see in your units as well. But the development and adoption of AI-enhanced pedagogies is very uneven across instructors and across programs. Some colleagues are highly innovative, others feel ill-equipped to redesign their courses, and this needs to change, but this kind of change cannot really be mandated top-down. You can't force somebody to teach with AI who's very skeptical about it. I've written together with Dr. Desane elsewhere about it, that if teachers are not thoughtful, informed, and have a certain baseline AI literacy, then it's probably actually much better not to teach with AI. Second, because this adoption is uneven, efforts often remain isolated and disjointed. We simply lack systematic mechanisms to grow a true community of practice, one that allows us to learn together from both our successes and from our failures, and that empowers us to scale what works. And thirdly, finally, we frankly lack a shared vision. There's no pedagogical grounded framework to guide us towards the intentional integration of generative AI across our curriculum. So to confront these challenges, I'm currently applying for funding support to create what's been called by the Teaching and Learning Lab a departmental action group within Global Languages. So this team would hopefully bring colleagues together across all ranks, along with students, along with an instructional technologist, and include hopefully also the participation of experts from the Teaching and Learning Lab. So over the next 3 years, this initiative would pursue 5 outcomes. First, we want to build a community of practice that supports instructor-led inquiry into how to use generative AI in our courses. Second, we aim to support the development, the piloting, the testing, and scaling of AI-aware pedagogies. Third, we plan to disseminate evidence-based open access resources. Fourth, we want to articulate a clear, coherent, actionable framework for AI-supported language learning. And fifth, we aim to establish a sustainable culture of continuous innovation. And we want to do that by anchoring all of our work in systematic outcome assessment. In many ways, we do that all for our students. Yeah? This sounds like a lot of big words, but in the end of the day, our number 1 and number 2 and number 3 stakeholder are students, students, students. But we also need to bring my department on the map. We have a long legacy in instructional innovation through technology at MIT, and there are a lot of language programs around the country, around the world, that look at us for leadership. Yeah? So MIT, you are leaders in AI matters around the world. Yeah? We, as Global Languages, have really no excuse but being leaders in our space and language education on AI and AI integration. Everything else would be failure. So, wish us luck, because the educational experience of thousands of MIT undergraduate students, quite literally, depends on our success. I want to close by stepping back and broadening the lens from AI in language education to AI in humanistic language education, or perhaps even the humanities more broadly. When people talk about AI at MIT, students often think about breakthroughs in computer science. But our students also need to learn to see AI as a mirror that reflects our assumptions about what counts as intelligence, authenticity, creativity, originality, and ultimately what counts as human and even what counts as humane. If we want the next generation of STEM leaders to build technologies that genuinely serve society, their education must also include opportunities to confront that mirror from multiple angles. And of course, I'm speaking here only with slight bias when I say the humanities and language classes are very, very well equipped to provide that space. Our classrooms are spaces where students learn to listen, to interpret, to question, to read in between lines, to feel doubt, and to judge carefully despite sitting with ambiguity. They're discovering routinely that linguistic nuance and intercultural sensitivity remain, at best, frontier challenges for AI systems. So humanistic language educators can offer laboratories for exploring the affordances and limitations of technology in relation to human intelligence, to linguistic ambiguity, in relation to contested authenticity, or artistic expression. Our teaching must help students see not only what machines can do, but see what they cannot do, and even more importantly, what humans still do better. In these AI-aware humanities and language classrooms, students confront daily the trade-offs between convenience and autonomy. They learn how the same algorithm can foster inclusion in one context and reproduce inequity in another. And very important, they practice communicating risks and limitations of AI across disciplinary, linguistic, and cultural boundaries. This is a skill that deeply matters for their future professional context, but also for the ability to participate as mature citizens. So without an intentional and gradual integration of AI into language and humanities education, these goals are impossible to reach. We should not be afraid, on the other hand, because we mustn't be perfect as educators in this space. Paradoxically, the AI-enhanced humanities and language classroom I'm envisioning is often most powerful when AI fails, when its brittle reasoning, its ignorance of context, or the grand illusion of understanding becomes painfully visible. This happens all the time when applying AI systems to linguistic and humanistic stress tests. In those moments, students see why humanistic inquiry still matters, why language proficiency still counts, and why decision-making and reasoning cannot be fully delegated to algorithms. They realize that comprehension, interpretation, empathy, authenticity, imagination, and moral reasoning are not remnants of an analog past. They are the frontier that technology alone cannot cross. Yet, thank you.
Ask my question in 3 parts. One, I'm not an educator. However, I am a daughter of an educator. Well, two educators. Two, I've learned many languages at MIT. English is my third language. My first language is Korean. And because I couldn't get into Harvard, I came to MIT. And I've learned, I've earned every penny of the $4,000 tuition in 1982 with a degree in 6.3, where I was totally mesmerized by Patrick Winston's lecture on Lisp. So my question now is to you, sir. Well, two parts to the part 3 of part 3A and 3B. A, there's a man named Joseph A. Yoon, who is also my year 1982 graduate of linguistics and PhD, who wrote a book called Robot Proof 10 years ago, so it's already halfway obsolete. He is the current president of Northeastern University, and his question is, how do we change and adapt our higher education system to meet the challenges of AI? And my second question is, part 3B, I had to learn 16 computer languages after I graduated from MIT, and I didn't mind learning that. It's the fact that they became obsolete so fast that worried me, not for myself, because I'm quite retired, but for my daughter. So what is your point of view on MIT teaching languages that won't soon be obsolete?
Thank you. This is really, really helpful, and thanks for this shout out on languages at MIT. I always love to hear that. Your first question, which is the question of the president of Northeastern University, what can higher education as a system do in order to adapt to AI? I have to disappoint you. If a university president asks that question, I'm perhaps not the best person to answer the question right away. So, because I think his ideas, he should be able to provide the answers if they exist. What?
He asked that question 10 years ago in his book.
Okay, good.
So I was hoping some of you would have the
Yes.
answers already.
No, I don't have the answer. that's the quick answer. So I think I'm a mid-level administrator. I look at what I can optimize in my context. I'm eager to get the inspiration from other fields and maybe offer some ideas that are useful for other contexts. But just like kind of the system-wide challenges, that's above my pay grade. Let's put it like that. Second thing, languages that become obsolete. Yeah. I congratulating you on learning 10 programming languages, because 16? Okay. Yes, because I don't know a single one. Yeah. So what I can say, what I have heard, is that in this new AI paradigm, a lot of coding abilities are delegated to algorithm, but that is still essential to know these languages, because you engage with the system iteratively in order to build your programs. Sorry, I'm talking probably like a 5-year-old talking about computer science. I apologize for that. Having said that, your knowledge of these languages, even if the programming is delegated more and more to algorithm, I think is far from becoming obsolete, because as you supervise the AI that's helping you program, your knowledge of these languages are very important. And I'm talking about it so long because it's an interesting, there's an interesting analogy to thinking about human languages. There's a possibility, and I mean this is not a possibility that already exists, that you put like your iBuds in, and then you have basically something that seemingly is a perfect, you have the illusion of a perfect instant translation that you get, but it's a translation that is at this point, and I'm aware that there are massive improvements forthcoming, but that is still very, very flawed because these systems tend to be not very sensitive to context, not very sensitive to nuance, and I don't see in my lifetime the possibility that I can have a dinner party with my friends in France and everybody's talking at the same time about 5 different topics, and that's how French people talk around a dinner table, and that I have these things then, and that I make the same jokes and run the same way this conversation that I would do if I were as proficient in French as I wish I would be. Yeah. So languages are not getting obsolete. It's even with these technologies, we need to. It would be always like a human-machine collaboration. Yeah? Math hasn't become obsolete because in the 70s we all got pocket calculators. Yeah? The field has changed fundamentally, but it has actually. Yeah. Anyways, I don't want to talk about math too much because that's another thing I don't know a lot about. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I found many parts of your lecture to be profound. And I asked my long question more as a rhetorical question than that you've addressed quite in depth. So thank you for that. And I just want to end with a joke. During IAP in 1979, I took a class. It was called Intensive Immersive German.
Oh.
And I only took it because I failed 801. I had no interest in physical physics. However, I did amazingly well in the next 802, which was electromagnetics physics. So I just want to end with the phrase I learned from my roommate, who was from Germany, and from the IAP class in German. Ich habe keine Ahnung, which translates to, I am clueless.
We are all often. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this dialogue.
Okay, sure. I was curious when you develop AI tools for one language like German, whether you find you can use the same or a similar tool for, let's say, Japanese. And also, I noticed in the past there have been some IAP courses comparing Asian languages like Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. And have you been developing AI tools to support that? For example, the difference in the meaning of a kanji character in Chinese versus Japanese, or the composition of kanji from its components?
A super interesting question. That's one of the reasons precisely, like one of the weaknesses. We are still very, very isolated, like in programs, individual instructors, in our practices around AI. That's precisely the reason for this grant, that we need more opportunities to come together as a community, to explore precisely the kind of questions. In many ways, I would say the answer to your question, is this possible that like one tool that works for Japanese will also work for German? It's a terrible answer that I have to give. And the answer is yes and no. Yes, there are a lot of things that are overlapping, but they're also very different cultural contexts and languages. The way we teach them, the way we learn them, the way our curriculum works at MIT is very, very, very deeply immersed in the cultural context. So I would be careful to do that. It reminds me to like when Rosetta Stone was relatively new. Or maybe it was Duolingo. No, I think it was Rosetta Stone because they had pictures, they had photographs of things. And they used the same deck of photographs across languages. Yeah, this is a chair, this is a table, this is a banana. Okay, a banana looks the same everywhere. But there's already like, this is how a German would sit around a table and eat breakfast. And maybe in another place you would sit on the floor. Yeah, so it's not that easy to think about if you think language as something that's deeply embedded in culture, to simply just like take one app and translate it into another language. Yeah. Thank you.